Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to continue hearing evidence from Mr. Maddison of the TMO. So would you ask Mr. Maddison to come back in, please? Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Maddison.
Morning.
That's it. Get organised and then...
Thank you.
Right. Good. Yes, when you're ready, Mr. Maddison.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Good morning, members of the panel. Good morning, Mr. Maddison.
Morning.
I'm going to ask you some questions now about the topic of consultation. Can I please take you to TMO, your statement, TMO 50892 at page 22. Look at paragraph 115. You said this: in terms of general interaction and concerns, there is a recognised local authority process whereby representative groups may voice opinions. Here, the recognised residents' associations had been the Lancaster West Residents Association and Lancaster West Management Board, but these were in existence before I joined TMO, and I had no interaction with them. My perception is that historically there had been issues with both organisations. Now, Lancaster West Estate Management Board had ceased to exist by the time you joined the TMO. Is that right?
I think so.
Yes. What historical, you use the word historical, what historical issues or problems had there been with the Lancaster West Residents Association?
I don't know the detail because I wasn't really involved with either organisation, but I think it was about having meetings that were quorate and holding AGMs, so there was a clear agenda, really.
Does that mean that when you joined the TMO in January 2013, there was no representative residents association for Grenfell Tower?
Not for Grenfell Tower on its own, no.
What about the Lancaster West estate more generally?
I don't know. I mean, there was a residents association, but I don't know the status of that residents association at that time. It did refocus itself later on. But I did attend at least one meeting of those, but I think I was the only one in about 2017.
Were you aware of an organisation called the Grenfell Tower Leaseholders Association, or GTLA?
I would get emails from members of that. I didn't know that it was a constituted organisation itself, but I did receive correspondence from that group.
Right. Did you consult with GTLA about the refurbishment or any other management problems or issues at Grenfell Tower?
Not specifically with them, but the residents or the leaseholders in that group would be involved in any block-wide consultation.
Did you ever check whether GTLA was a registered association? Registered?
I had conversations with the head of the home ownership team, who was responsible for the leaseholders, and also the head of resident engagement. So I had briefings from people who knew those organisations.
Now, can we go please to RBK 50860? This is the Grenfell Tower Regeneration Communication Plan Draft Version 1, and you can see that it's created in August 2013 by Thea McNaught-Reynolds as the author, and shows the project manager as Claire Williams. Are you familiar with this document?
I haven't seen it probably since that date.
Right. Did you see it back then?
I don't recall. It'll be...
Right. Do you know who asked for it to be produced?
I don't.
Can you go to page 3, please? We can see in the left-hand column there, under 1.5, communications objectives, a number of objectives in the column. And objective 1 is residents of Grenfell Tower understand goals of the project and projected timelines. And the plan would be a responsive, two-way communication with residents, responding to their concerns and questions in a timely manner, level of engagement, consult. And objective 2, residents of Grenfell Tower have confidence in the project and TMO's ability to deliver. Plan, responsive two-way communication with residents, facilitates a positive ongoing relationship, level of engagement, consult. And it continues down the series of objectives, turning from consult to inform in places. The plan clearly sets out that communication with residents should be two-way, as I've shown you. Did you agree with this idea at the time, do you think?
Yes, I think this is this document is trying to lay out the ways in which we would communicate, engage, consult or involve residents at various stages.
Do you remember having any input into this plan?
I don't specifically remember it, but it's something that we would have discussed within the project team, yes.
Right. And who is Thea McNaught Reynolds?
She was a communications officer.
And what was her role in relation to the refurbishment, in general terms?
She would give advice on communications issues.
And she clearly produced this document. Do you know who she produced it for?
I don't remember this document being produced. It was a very long time ago.
Right.
Now.
Do you remember any discussion of this document?
Not specifically the document. There was discussion about how to consult residents and how that engagement would work in practice.
Right. You can see in the right-hand column that, as I said, there's a plan to consult under objectives 1 and 2, and a plan under objective 3 to inform. And same again under objective 4 and 5 in the second bullet point. Different levels of engagement, you see. What was the difference between consult level of engagement and inform level of engagement?
I think it's at different stages of the project. There will be different types of engagement with residents potentially. So, I mean, I think the consultation is about a two-way communication where we're asking for feedback on a proposal, for example. Inform is maybe sometimes when things are more definite, it's informing somebody that something is going to happen on a particular day.
Right.
And there was also a further level of detail which was about involving residents. And so, for example, we would involve residents in the selection process of contractors, for example, and involve them in evaluating contractor bids. So they're the three dimensions of a consultation plan.
Now, the objectives, as you can see in the left-hand column, were clearly objectives relating to the refurbishment. Do you know who perceived these objectives to be necessary objectives? Put another way, whose idea was it that these objectives were aimed at problems to be solved?
I don't necessarily think they're problems to be solved. I think this was probably a discussion document that Thea has put together to try and provoke a conversation within the project team about how we can consult, involve, inform residents.
I mean, do you know the basis, for example, on which Thea McNaught Reynolds thought it was necessary to have a specific objective whereby residents of Grenfell Tower have confidence in the project and TMO's ability to deliver?
Sorry, could you ask that question?
Yes.
Again?
What was the basis of the author's decision to have a specific objective 2, as you can read it there? That residents of Grenfell Tower have confidence in the project and TMO's ability to deliver?
I don't know.
Right. I mean, did somebody tell her that that was an objective that was necessary?
I think she must have come to an opinion that was a reasonable objective and put it to the team as a proposal.
Yes. My question to you is, do you know why she formed that opinion?
I don't.
Right. Can we turn to page 6, please, where we'll see a situation analysis. And on the screen about halfway down, 2/3 of the way down, it says, in general, a lack of trust. Do you see that?
No.
Well, it's about 2/3 of the way down the screen, with the little where the arrow is.
Yes.
In general, a lack of trust and a perception by residents that TMO doesn't respect them are clear barriers to the project. Inadequate and intermittent communication has also given residents cause for distrust, and they have resorted to making FOI requests to obtain the information they believe has been denied them. And then there are some entries under that. resident consultation on certain aspects of design, etc., but not overall, regular newsletter light on information, letters to residents ad hoc and not providing the information they wish to see, face-to-face meetings have been acrimonious and unproductive. Now, those four matters there, do you agree that each of those four statements were justified at the time?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assessment.
Yes. And again, do you know what the source of these descriptions of the relationship between the TMO and the residents of the Lancaster West estate were?
I think at this time, so from memory, the first meeting I had with the way that we consulted residents up to this point, there'd been a different team. So my predecessor had a particular approach to communicating with residents, and this was a review because there'd been the project had stalled at this stage. There were some planning issues. The project had stalled. A lot of the conversation from residents at this stage was about distrust about the project being delivered because of delays. A lot of the complaints were about delays, and that came across quite strongly at the first meeting that I went to with residents in, I think, the June of 2013. And I think Thea was at that meeting, and I think she's taken this document to pull together her assessment of some of the issues that she felt that residents were saying from that meeting. Right. And in trying to pull together a proposal as to how we can engage residents more effectively going forwards.
Now, the sentence that I read to you, 2/3 of the way down, in general, a lack of trust and a perception by residents, etc. It's clear from this, isn't it, that the lack of trust and perception described there was not limited to a number of particular individuals. Certainly the author of this paper regarded it as a general problem.
I don't know. I think this is probably, Thea, I assume at this stage had probably only been to one meeting, so I think she was taking an assessment based on quite a limited amount of evidence, but I think I could understand why she came to that conclusion.
Can we go to page 10, please? And here we see a communications activities schedule towards the foot of the page. And it says, this communications activities schedule is a live document which will be regularly reviewed and updated to make sure that agreed communications activities are being carried out and communications objectives are being met. Communications will be responsible for updating this schedule as and when changes or new opportunities occur. And then you can see the columns across the bottom of the page: date, activity, channel, and action, bind, and involvement. And then if you turn to the next page, please, page 11, we've got the activities for the year 2013, starting in July, perhaps because this document is dated August. And then you could see those in July and August on that page. And if one scrolls down, there's no need to do this, but one can scroll over the following pages. It runs into September and October and November to the end of the year. Particularly, look at the item at the bottom of page 11, Thursday, 15th of August, proposed Grenfell Tower Regeneration Residents Group to residents, and then at the Thursday meeting. You see that? Was a Grenfell Tower Regeneration Residents Group actually proposed to residents at that meeting? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I went to a series of meetings following the initial meeting in June that year, and the meetings were very poorly attended, and I think what we were discussing here was how we could put together a more effective way of communicating with residents. So I don't remember whether there was specifically that was discussed at that meeting or not, but I do know that shortly after that we did a consultation process with residents to consult them on the way that they wanted to be consulted, which was really the next step from this.
Yes. We do have the minutes of that meeting, and I'll read. They are at TMO 100499910. But I won't take them to you. Take it from me that there's no reference to a group being proposed. My question is, why was a residents' group not actually created at that time?
I don't know about at that time, and that was the August. I do remember we consulted residents more broadly on the various ways in which they could or wanted to be consulted, and that was where the focus was given from this point.
Right. I see. Now, can we go to your statement, please, where we were before, page 22 this time, and look at paragraph 116, just below where we were. We held public meetings and drop-in sessions for residents. We then consulted residents on their preferred method of consultation. Only one resident favoured public meetings. The majority asked for newsletters plus informal drop-ins. Now, can I show you first, please, TMO 1003-1174. TMO 100311174. That is a document entitled Grenfell Tower Review Consultation, Section 5, Consultation Surveys. Are these the consultation surveys you were referring to just there in your statement?
I've never seen this document.
I see.
I don't think so. No.
You've never seen this document before?
No, this looks like this is a TMO Ryden issue. So I assume these survey forms are about the detailed surveys of residents' home about where central heating layouts will be. And so, no, I think that's a document that Rydens would produce with the TMO when we're consulting about the specifics of works in their homes. The consultation document that I was talking about was, so each time we had a public meeting, we would also have drop-in sessions. So you'd have a formal meeting, and we'd also have an opportunity for people to come and talk to us individually. And that was a process that seemed to work because it was easier for people to talk about their specific needs or concerns to people. And at those meetings in the December and January that year, we carried out a resident survey asking about the appropriate methods that they would prefer to be consulted. And the strong preference was for residents to continue the drop-in sessions, but to be informed through newsletters on progress. But very few people, I think only one person actually said that they wanted larger public meetings.
Right. Well, let's just stick with this document and see how far you can help us. Can we please go to page 3, where we can see a blank form?
Okay.
How do you want us to consult with you? Please rank options with 1 being top and 6 being least preferred. And you can see the 6 options there. And the option for a formal meeting, you can see is item 5, formal meeting held between 6 and 7 p.m. Is that right? The only option for a formal meeting was that 1 hour in the evening?
That was being proposed as a proposal.
Yeah. But do you know any other proposal for any other kinds of meetings, other than the 1 hour in the early evening?
Well, drop-in sessions would always be run during the day and in the evening, so there'd be informal opportunities for people to come and discuss with us.
And you could see that residents were asked to rate their preference from 1 to 6. If we go to page 9 of this document, we can see the results of that survey. There you can see 65 households attended this session, i.e. over 50% of block 55 forms were returned. And the top preference, as you can see there, was for individual letters posted or put through the door. That's right, is it? That's what they wanted?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Right. So not newsletters, yes?
Well, newsletters were the second preference.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
was there any attempt to consult further residents after this survey, or did you leave it at that?
So from this survey, we went through a process of doing all of these items, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But we didn't hold formal meetings, and we also put notices on the notice. So we actually did all of these things, but didn't have formal meetings because those meetings had been poorly attended, and people didn't appear to find them a useful way of communicating. So our focus was really trying to be more bespoke to individual needs, talking to residents on a one-to-one basis or in smaller groups at a drop-in session. And so we give a broad range of opportunities for people to engage with us.
If we go back to page 1 of this document, we can see on the first page there, in the first box, it says that the consultation survey, central heating survey, and information on central heating was sent by TMO and Ryden to residents attending the drop-in session on 12th December 2013. Is that right? Is that what happened as a matter of fact?
I don't know. I didn't attend those meetings.
No, but even if you didn't attend those meetings, did you know that that's what had happened? So the results of the survey.
I'd understood that all of the people who attended those drop-in sessions in December and January were asked to fill in the form that you showed me before, yes, to give us their preferences about how they wanted to be consulted.
Right. I mean, this suggests that the survey was taken at a drop-in session on the 12th of December 2013. Is that correct?
My understanding is that it took place at the drop-in sessions. I think there was more than one session in December 13 and in January 14, was my understanding.
Right. So you say there were two occasions, two drop-in sessions, one on the 12th of December 2013 and another in January 2014. Is that your recollection, is it? Right, I see. Can we then go to the KCTMO Programme Board meeting minutes of the 21st of November 2013, and we'll find those at TMO 100284444, page 7. And we can see that we can see who is present, and we can see that you attended the meeting for the first item, assets and regeneration, together with David Burns. And if we look at the last line of the first paragraph, it says, "It has been agreed to hold no more public meetings because of the stand being made by the Grenfell Tower leaseholder group." Now, I'm showing you that. Now, let me show you your first witness statement, please, at page 34. And let's go on that page, please, to paragraph 179. You deal with this meeting there. You say, "I attended the next programme board on 21st November 2013, reporting that formal planning approval was still awaited, but we were ready to go out to tender and would be on site next spring. It is inaccurately recorded that I reported that it had been agreed to hold no more public meetings because of the stand being made by the Grenfell Tower leaseholder group. The reality was that residents' meetings were poorly attended and nobody wanted them, and we moved to drop-in sessions and newsletters." Now, is it right that you received the minutes that I've just shown you after the meeting?
I don't remember.
Why did you not correct the minutes, if you did receive them, when you did?
I don't know that I picked up that nuance.
Right. So is this another example of minutes of meetings which you disagree with?
I think it's not precisely what I was reporting. Right. In reality, what we did from that point, from the point of that meeting, was to consult residents on how they wanted to be consulted. That would have been a more accurate way of reporting what was being agreed at this time.
Can we go to RYD 409237? This is a note dated the 14th of November 2013 on the Grenfell Tower regeneration note paper with some topics set out. And it's the notes from the Grenfell evening meeting. And under the header Issues Raised, if you look 3/4 of the way down the screen, procedures, we have A, apologies, and then B, notice of events. It says, comment was made that 6 days' notice was not enough. In future, the TMO will give 7 days' notice of future consultation events. Do you recall that there was concern among the residents of Grenfell Tower that there was not enough notice to them about when consultation events would take place?
I don't remember that.
Was the number of residents who participated in such events affected, do you remember, by the late notification of the events or meetings?
I don't think it was a significant factor because none of the meetings were very well. Well, there was one meeting that was well attended, but that was really because there was an appetite to talk about the power surges that were relevant that were happening at that time.
That was earlier in 2020.
That was in June.
Yes.
But the subsequent meetings were very poorly attended. There would be a handful of people, and I didn't think it was late notification that was leading to that.
Right. RBK 403386, please. This is an email exchange between Councillor Blakeman and Councillor Rock Fielding Mellon, copy to Laura Johnson, on the 11th of December 2013. And if we look at the last paragraph on page 1, it says, at the moment, Mr. Defan, and the next few words are redacted, something, but he has been so disruptive during the Grenfell Tower consultations that Peter Maddison has suggested, and I have agreed, that we do not hold any more open meetings. Now, do you recall, I'll show you that, do you recall discussing the consultation meetings with Councillor Blakeman?
Yes.
Do you recall suggesting to her, as she records here, that you do not hold any more open meetings?
I discussed the fact that the meetings that we had were poorly attended and could be disrupted, and that we should consult residents on how we should consult them going forward, and so we could be more effective in our consultation, because the process we were going through with these meetings wasn't working.
You see, she says at the time that he, Mr. Defan, has been so disruptive during the Grenfell Tower consultations that Peter Maddison has suggested, and she has agreed, that we do not hold any more open meetings. At the time, she was attributing to the cessation of open meetings to Mr. Defan's disruptive conduct during those consultation meetings, and attributed that to you as the suggestion.
I would put it a different way, which would be that the meetings that we were holding weren't effective, they weren't well attended, and that we should look at a better way of engaging with residents.
Well, she hasn't said, Peter Maddison has suggested that we don't hold any more open meetings because they're not well attended. She's saying that you suggested it because of Mr. Defan's conduct. Do you agree?
They're Councillor Blakeman's words, not mine.
They are. Do you agree?
I don't agree. Well, I don't disagree with the fact that the meetings were disrupted, but I felt the key issue from my personal perspective was that I felt that the consultation meetings weren't effective and that we should do something different. And that was to really focus on what residents wanted and how they wanted to be engaged with, and make sure that we were listening to their issues and responding to them on a more one-to-one basis than as a collective.
Do you agree that the reason, or one of the reasons, that you suggested that you stop holding open meetings was because of Mr. Defan's disruptive conduct?
One of the reasons was that some of the meetings there was disruptive behaviour at some of those meetings, yes.
Right.
But there were other factors too.
I see. Were you seeking to prevent Mr. Defan from participating fully in the consultation process?
Not at all. There were 120 households in the block, and it was important that we listened to all of them, including Mr. Defan.
Now, can we turn to the Grenfell Compact next? Now, if we look at your first statement, please, at page 22, next paragraph down, paragraph 117, you say, a formal focus group recognised by local authorities and known as a compact was set up specifically in response to issues raised by and on behalf of residents regarding the location of the HIUs within St Flats. This was set up and various individuals were involved. Now, it's right, isn't it, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the TMO agreed to recognise the Grenfell Compact at a meeting on the 17th of July 2015, attended by Victoria Borwick, the MP.
I don't know if that's correct. There'd been previous contact with the Compact residents before that. The Compact residents had contacted Councillor Blakeman, and Councillor Blakeman attended Councillor Blakeman's surgery in June, and I'd met with the group in June in the show flat. So that predated the meeting with Councillor Borwick.
Yes, my question was about recognition rather than contact. Do you agree that the TMO agreed to recognise the Grenfell Compact on the 17th of July 2015?
I don't know. I don't recall exactly the details of when it was recognised, but we had engaged with the residents in the Compact prior to that meeting.
Well, let me put something to you. Can we please go to IWS 402110, please? I'll show you the first page. This is a witness statement to the inquiry given by Mr. Willie Thompson, who was a resident of Grenfell Tower. This is the first page of his second statement to the inquiry. Can we go to page 21 in that document, please? I want to show you paragraph 75 on page 21. I'm so sorry, page 21 was right, paragraph 73 I think we want. Sorry, 75, page 22. I'm sorry, 22. I'm sorry to jump back and forth. Formation of the Compact. It was only after Victoria Borwick MP attended the 17th July residents' meeting with Ryden and with Peter Maddison that the TMO allowed us to be recognised. David Collins applied for us to be recognised as a compact, and we were. Do you agree, or did you agree, to recognise the Grenfell Compact because of Victoria Borwick MP's intervention on that date?
No, as I explained, we'd met with the group previously with Councillor Blakeman in the show flat to discuss the issue around the HIU. So that was an ongoing discussion, and that was as a result of Councillor Blakeman talking to that group and saying to me that she felt that they had some issues that we needed to communicate with them about. The formal recognition of the compact would have been put in place by the community engagement team, and I had no part in the detail of signing up to that agreement, from what I remember.
Right. Now, can we go then, please, to TMO 00832280? This is an email from Edward Defarn to Janet Edwards at the TMO, dated 24th of January 2014. If we go to page 2 in that document, we can see that that is at the end of an email chain, which has on it, at the very top of page 2, an email of the 24th of January to Mr. Defarn from Janet Edwards of the TMO. And she says, I write further to Claire Williams' email to you below, dated 23rd of January. I would like to reiterate, as we've done previously, that the TMO are unable to recognise Grenfell Tower Residents Group, as there is in existence an RA covering the Lancaster West Estate area. I will again, by separate email, forward the responses you received from Yvonne Birch and myself on this matter in 2012/13. Do you remember that? Do you remember this exchange? You weren't copied in on it, it is fair to say, but do you remember the subject coming up?
I wasn't copied into it, but I was aware from talking to Janet Edwards, who was the head of the resident engagement team, that there had been previous conversations from Mr. Defarn trying to set up a specific resident group for Grenfell. Her view was that there was already a resident association set up for Lancaster West.
Right.
And so I had no part in that, but I was aware of that being the position.
Now, going back to the email I started this with, which was the email from Mr. Defarn to Janet Edwards in response on page 1, you're not copied in on this. Claire Williams is. Do you think you saw this at the time nonetheless?
I don't think so, no.
You don't think so? Do you remember nonetheless that Janet Edwards' refusal of Mr. Defan's request to recognise a Grenfell Tower residents group provoked bitter complaint from him?
I don't recall.
I'm summarising.
I don't think I would have been involved in that time.
Right. I see. Can we then move on further into the year then, 2014? TMO H404881. It's a strange reference, but there it is. And this is an email of the 17th of September 2014 from Janet Edwards to Edward Defan, where she says, in the second paragraph, I would confirm that the TMO has no objection to the tenants and leaseholders of Grenfell Tower forming a Grenfell Tower Improvement Works resident group, and I would advise that this group will be consulted by the TMO on matters relating to the Grenfell Tower building works. Indeed, the TMO has no objection to any residents wishing to form a resident group for the purposes of consultation. I would also confirm that we are still working with the Lancaster West RA, which represents all residents on the Lancaster West estate. Now, you weren't copied in on this, but it did go to the complaints team and Phola. Were you aware that Janet Edwards had changed her position in 2014, September 2014, from the position that had previously been taken by her in the January of that year?
I don't know that she's changed her position. I think she's making a distinction between a residents' association and a group that's put together for the purposes of consultation on a particular project. I suspect that's what she's highlighting here.
Do you know why Ms. Edwards didn't make this suggestion when asked originally in January 2014?
I don't know.
Right. Can we please go to TMO 00846-124? This is an email if we go to page 2 in that email run, please. This is an email from Claire Williams to David Collins, copied to Edward Defan. And in the middle of page 2, the fourth paragraph down, you can see what she says there. She says, in your email, you ask whether the TMO would acknowledge the Grenfell Community Unite group as a representative voice of leaseholders and tenants. I'm advised that this group will not be recognised by the TMO as there is a residents' association already in existence. The TMO are currently working with the existing Lancaster West Residents Association and are currently making arrangements with them to hold an AGM. There was communication with Mr. Defan in early 2014 to forming an alternative residents group. Now, I should have told you the date of this. It's 17th of April 2015 now. But before I ask you about what I just read out to you in that email, and I want you to have that in mind, I just want to look at 2 earlier emails. The first one is at TMO 00845-965. This is an email from you on the 1st of April 2015 to Phola, copied to a number of people at the TMO, including Janet Edwards, you'll see, as well as Claire Williams and Janet Edwards. Again, she appears twice. And you say, Mr. Defan is continuing to agitate in Grenfell Tower. Attached to the latest posts on his website, he's clearly distributing misleading information. I've highlighted the most serious allegations. Phola, I wonder if you could advise on the point at which his comments become libelous. Most of the comments relate to works that are not yet finished. Furthermore, there has been no direct contact from this group to formally raise these issues. We will continue to communicate with residents through our regular newsletters. Our continued approach is to focus on one-to-one consultation to agree the detail of the scope of works within residents' homes. Mr. Defan continues to press for a recognised resident group. And you attached, as we can see, certain blog posts to your email. Those are at TMO 00845-967. And there are a number of these in this document reference. But I'll just show you this first one. It's entitled "A Collective Voice for Residents as Grenfell Community Unite is Formed!" Posted on the 31st of March 2015. So the day before your email, Mr. Maddison. What did you think Mr. Defan was doing in Grenfell Tower by way of, as you put it, agitation?
Could we go back to that email?
Yes, can we go to the previous document, please? TMO 00845
So I think there were a number of issues going on here that, so one was Mr. Defan wanted a collective group for Grenfell Tower to represent them. And there's been an ongoing dialogue between the resident engagement team and himself about that. Then there's a discussion about how to consult residents on the works. So it's a discrete issue relating to the works. And that was where we had consulted residents on how they want to be consulted and come to a particular view as to how we were going to take that forward, given the feedback that had been received to date. This next piece of communication seemed to be at odds with what we consulted with the broader community about, and that felt like an area that needed to be resolved. Some of the issues that were being raised through Mr. Defan's blog were being communicated inaccurately. For example, he was saying that, giving photographs of work that were in progress, saying, look at these terrible exposed pipeworks, where in fact the pipework hadn't yet been enclosed. And so it was passing misinformation through the blog, and that was where I felt that we needed to be very clear on how we communicated to all the residents and engaged with all the residents in the block, not just a small number.
What did you mean by agitation?
I think that I felt he was passing misleading information through his blog, and using that to cause confusion among the residents. So we were trying to consult residents and engage with residents, and the blog was giving misleading information. Now,
You say in the second paragraph, as I've read to you, that you've highlighted the most serious allegations. Can we go back to the document I was on, which was the blog posts, TMO 00845-967. The yellow there is your highlighting, is it?
I don't remember.
Right. You don't remember. We've proceeded on the basis that they are your highlights. If they're not, then please do tell me. Can we go to page 1, please, first of all? And we can see there that you're pursuing, as he sees it, a TMO Ryden hated policy of divide and rule. And then in the last sentence, that you've treated the residents with complete contempt. Turn to page 2. TMO Ryden using threatening and intimidatory tactics to scare residents into allowing them access into our homes. We despise these underhand and bullying tactics from the TMO Ryden, who have been telling residents that if they do not cooperate, they will have no heating for some time. Around May 2015, and they will lose their tenancies unless access is granted, so that Ryden can come in and simply butcher our homes. It's ridiculous that the TMO can even be thinking of threatening us with legal action when all we've requested is that they don't enter our properties without first giving us a guarantee that the work will be undertaken in a professional manner and to a high standard. That's another one you've highlighted. Then if we go to page 4, second paragraph, Mr. Edward Defan then informed the meeting about past attempts by residents to gain a united voice for the Grenfell Tower community and how the RBKC Council and the TMO have worked to prevent tenants and leaseholders from forming any form of collective resident representation. I've shown you 3 of those you've highlighted, or it appears that you've highlighted. What was it about those particular passages that you objected to?
Could we go to the second one?
Yes, go to page 2, please, with threatening and intimidatory tactics.
So it's saying that we were threatening and intimidating residents, which I didn't think was accurate or true.
Right.
Threatening residents if they didn't cooperate, they'd have no heating. That wasn't true, and they would lose their tenancies unless access is granted. None of these things were true. So I felt that it was important that residents were clear on how we were consulting them and what the issues were, and we certainly weren't threatening people in the way that is suggested here.
Yes.
And I felt that was quite serious.
Yes. Yes, you say none of these things in this passage were true. You say that now. Did you, at the time, carry out any investigation into these allegations before writing to Fola Cofidia the next day?
This sort of language was used quite commonly at a lot of the Compact meetings and in the meetings with Mr. Defan, that he would say that residents had been bullied and harassed, and without giving any specifics of what that meant, what that was, and there were no specifics given about quite how that was to be the case. And I said I would investigate any specific issues, but these were very broad issues. They were very broad statements which didn't have any truth in them, as far as I could tell. In terms of, we didn't say that people would have no heating, and we knew that wouldn't be an appropriate thing to do, and we wouldn't allow that to happen, and we wouldn't tell people that they would risk losing their tenancies unless they gave access. That just wasn't factually true.
Well, Mr. Maddison, I understand that. I'm asking you a slightly more specific question. This blog post is posted on the 31st of March. Stripping away the language in this passage for the moment, look at the allegation that TMO, just take away the language and just look at the bare allegation, which is that TMO Ryden have told residents that if they do not cooperate, they will have no heating from around May 2015 and will lose their tenancies. Now, my question is not whether that's true or not, but whether you personally investigated whether it was true at the time.
Whether I investigated,
Yes.
Well, yes, I would have had conversations with the project team and with Rydens about what was being alleged here.
Right. Let's break that up. When did you have a conversation with the project team about that allegation?
At various stages throughout. At this stage, I'm referring. My understanding was that these allegations weren't true, and I'd spoken to Rydens and the project team about it. I don't remember specifically when, but there was no truth in those allegations.
Yes, so you keep saying what I'm after is your investigations, your personal investigations in an even-handed manner into whether they were true. So, discussions, let's start with TMO. Who did you speak to at TMO about whether this allegation that I've just read to you in the bare terms was made?
In the TMO, I would have spoken to Claire Williams and to David Gibson.
Do you remember actually having a conversation and asking them and putting to them the allegation in this blog and saying, is there any truth in this?
Yeah, I'm sure I would have had that.
Well, you say you're sure. Do you remember?
No, I don't remember a specific conversation at this.
Next one, Ryden. Do you remember speaking yourself to Ryden and asking them whether they've been going around telling residents that if they don't cooperate, they won't have any heating or will lose their tenancies?
Yes, I'd have spoken to Simon Lawrence about these issues, and Simon Lawrence from Rydens came to the meetings with me and the residents from the Compact.
Yeah. Did you actually go to him with this blog and say, Simon, is any of this true?
I don't remember if I specifically did in relation to this blog, but I certainly had conversations with him about these allegations, not necessarily in relation to this blog.
So sorry, I see. Not necessarily in relation to this blog. So you saying that these allegations had been made very specifically before the 31st of March, and you'd investigated them already?
No, afterwards.
Afterwards.
So subsequently, myself and Simon Lawrence met with Councillor Blakeman and residents of Grenfell in Grenfell Tower to discuss the issues relating to the HIU, and that was where some of these issues were raised, and I discussed them with Simon.
So is your evidence that you investigated the truth or falsehood of this allegation after you wrote your email the next day, 1st of April?
No, I'm not tying those two things together. You're asking me about when I spoke to Rydens. I don't specifically remember when I spoke to Rydens about that, but my understanding from the conversations that I'd had with Rydens and with the project team that the issues that were being raised weren't accurate.
You see, in the email I read to you, you are saying, and you highlighted, the most serious allegations which you say are misleading. And my question is, and what I'm trying to understand is, what investigations you yourself carried out into the truth or falsehood of the factual allegations before writing the email on the 1st of April?
And my response is that I would have spoken to my project team and the head of service and the contractor, but I don't specifically remember when. This was a long time ago now.
Now, let's look at the 4th page of this blog, which we looked at, where in the second paragraph it says Edward Defan then informed the meeting. I've read it out already. I'm not going to read it out again. It was true, though, wasn't it, that Grenfell Tower Community Unite had been refused recognition until July 2015. So, in other words, at the time of this blog, which was 31st of March 2015, Grenfell Community Unite had been refused recognition.
I don't know that anybody had been in contact with Community Unite.
Well, we've seen the January correspondence with Janet Edwards.
With Community Unite or with Edward Defan?
With Mr. Defan.
So that's with an individual, Mr. Defan. So Community Unite was a group that wasn't recognised.
Yes,
I understand.
I take your point.
And I think that there are two quite discrete issues here. One is about the block consultation, about setting up a separate tenants association for Grenfell Tower, which I understood was the objective here. And the second issue was about having a group or a structure for engaging with all residents in Grenfell Tower about the works to their block.
Yes, I take your point. No, not Grenfell Community Unite, but it was certainly true, wasn't it, that there had been past attempts by residents to gain a united voice for the Grenfell Tower community, which had been refused by the TMO. That's the case, isn't it?
I don't know.
Well, I showed you the emails earlier in 2015, January 2015.
Well, when you said residents, I saw an email from the community engagement team and Mr. Defan, one resident. I wasn't sure whether there were more residents.
Yeah. But it's true, isn't it, that the TMO had actually, as a fact, refused to recognise a Grenfell community group in respect of the refurbishment, as at the 31st of March 2015.
No, that's not accurate.
Do you think that's
So
accurate?
so when you're saying a group, so I think the group that Janet Edwards was talking to Edward Defan about was about a tenants association in the block. The conversation with residents about a consultation group, we had a group, we'd had public meetings in the building that had been poorly attended. We consulted residents on how they wanted to be attended, and there was no appetite at all from that consultation for public meetings. So we listened to what residents were saying, and we consulted them through informal drop-in sessions and newsletters. Those informal drop-in sessions could be groups of people. Didn't have to be individual one-to-ones. They could have been groups of people coming together at those meetings too. So we were responding to what feedback we'd received from residents at that stage.
Now, the second email is from Claire that I wanted to show you before we get to your later one, is at TMO 00846-102. And that's dated the 13th of April, 2015. There it is on the page. And you can see that it's to you, copied to David Gibson. And Claire Williams forwards you the email that she's received from Grenfell Community Unite, just below that. And it says in the third line, Robert Black walked by on Friday and we discussed the fact that the preference was not to meet up with the Grenfell Community Unite group, which could be a showcase for Mr. Defan. And then she asked for comments on her response. Who was it who maintained a preference not to meet with Grenfell Community Unite as a group?
I don't know.
Did you share the preference not to meet with the group?
At this time, I was working on the basis of the consultation that we'd carried out very recently with residents about how they wanted to be consulted. And from that consultation, there was a clear message to me anyway at that stage that there wasn't an appetite from residents for large public meetings, the type that were being suggested here. So I was dubious as to whether this was the right approach. However, in due course, we did listen and we did meet this group. But at that stage, so soon after carrying out a consultation and having we'd had feedback from more than half of the residents in the block, I didn't think that there was an appetite for this type of meeting.
Well, it's not talking about a meeting. It's talking about a meeting with a group. So are you saying that would be what kind of meeting would that be? A public meeting, or just a meeting between Mr. Black and perhaps you with members of the Grenfell Community Unite group?
I don't know. I think that there was there had been a series of public meetings with Grenfell on consulting residents about the proposed works, and those meetings were poorly attended. When we carried out a consultation, it was well responded to. Residents said it showed no appetite for those sort of meetings. However, we did have drop-in sessions that people could come to as individuals or as groups. So there was an opportunity there for people to come and engage, and so there was. And so I think that's really what this is flagging up.
Well, Mr. Maddison, with respect, we're in danger of sliding away into a slightly different subject, which is public meetings. I'm not asking you about public meetings. I'm simply asking you, I'll put the question one more time, whether you shared the preference, not yourself, to meet with members of the Grenfell Community Unite group.
I had questions about whether this meeting was going to, the purpose of this meeting was, really. I thought there might have been a different agenda in terms of the residents' association for the block, and I was really working on the basis of trying to consult residents on the basis that we'd agreed with them through the consultation that took place at the turn of the year, and that we communicated to all residents through the newsletter. So I was just trying to work on the basis of this is what we've consulted, this is the feedback we've got from you, this is what we're doing, and I was just trying to stick to that. And I felt that this might have been a complicating factor in that.
Right. So I think the answer is yes. You did share the preference not to meet with members of the group, because is this right, or is this fair? It would cut across the way you perceived the consultation should go, which is consultation resident by resident.
Which is what we'd agreed with the residents, yes.
What did you understand that Claire Williams meant by the words, which could be a showcase for Mr. Defan?
I'm assuming that she's referring to the fact that Mr. Defan could dominate public meetings.
Right. Was that the real reason that recognition of the group was refused, at least at this time?
I don't think the recognition of the group wasn't refused.
Well, it was until the 17th of July.
But we met earlier than the 17th of July. It was in June.
Right. Let's see. is it right that before the recognition of the Grenfell Compact on the 17th of July 2015, tenants could only raise issues or concerns on an individual basis and not collectively?
There were drop-in sessions, we would carry out regular drop-in sessions.
Yes, sorry, a drop-in session is where a resident talks to a member of the TMO.
Or many residents.
Right, so I'll ask my question again.
So the resident drop-in sessions were held in the block in a show flat, which we used to demonstrate the works that were going to be carried out. We would communicate to residents through newsletter, saying these are the issues that we're going to be discussing at the next drop-in session, and people would come either as individuals or in households or as in groups of households as they wished.
Yes, I understand about groups. Really what I'm after is something slightly different, which is a collective voice. Is it right that before the recognition of the Grenfell Compact in July 2015, tenants could only raise issues or concerns on an individual basis, as opposed to a collective basis?
Well, they could raise issues on a collective basis at the drop-in sessions if they wished. It wasn't a bar on people being able to come together as a group and talk to us.
But if Mr. Defan had turned up at a drop-in session and said, I represent 46 residents in the building under the banner of Grenfell Unite, you wouldn't have recognised him doing that. You would have only said to him, well, I can entertain your personal complaints, but not your collective complaints.
And that is the approach that we took in the Compact too. So, I mean, even within the Compact, we wouldn't deal with specific issues to an individual.
Yes, but am I right that before the Compact was formed, even had Mr. Defan purported to voice concerns for a wider group, they wouldn't have been recognised? Only his personal, individual issues and concerns would have been recognised. That's what I'm getting at.
But if an individual raised concerns about the wider group, we would investigate those concerns with the wider group.
Now, we can see the response that you give to Claire Williams at TMO. It's in a different email string. TMO 00846-106, page 1. And you're, I think, commenting here on a draft that she's presented. And you say, thanks for this, I think it's very good. And a couple of main comments. And then in the second paragraph, second paragraph, you say some redrafting of the following para is needed. See highlighted section. In your email, you ask whether the TMO would acknowledge the Grenfell Community Unite group as a representative voice of leaseholders and tenants. I'm advised that this group will not be recognised by the TMO, as there is a residents' association already in existence. The TMO are currently working with the existing Lancaster West Residents Association and are currently making arrangements with them to hold an AGM. Mr. Defan will have historic communication from the TMO dating back to early 2014 relating to forming an alternative residents group. Now, it's right, isn't it, that LWRA, the Lancaster West Residents Association, was not actually functioning before the AGM, was it?
I don't know.
Do you know what arrangements the TMO was in fact making for the LWRA to hold an AGM?
No, I wasn't involved in
Do you know whether one was held?
I wasn't involved.
Do you know what steps that you took to allow collective consultation at this point instead of an AGM for the LWRA?
We consulted residents on how they want to be consulted, and there wasn't an appetite for that sort of collective engagement.
Let's go then to December 2015. TMO 1001151, sorry, 119. TMO 100115191. Page 2, please. And I'm sorry, I was going to get back to something, actually, that I should have done before. Before I come to that, can I go back, please, to Claire Williams' email at TMO 00846-124. This is her response, which she sends to Mr. Collins and Mr. Defan. We've seen the background to it now. If you go to page 2, please, and look at paragraph 4, I read that to you. That was, in fact, it's right, isn't it, how matters were left in relation to recognition of a collective group for a collective voice as of the 17th of April 2015.
Yes.
Yes. And can I then go to where I'd gone, which is December 2015, TMO 100111591, please, page 2. This is the minute of an RBKC TMO joint management meeting, 2nd of December 2015. And if we just skip back to page 1, we can see that you were there. There you are, identified as the third from bottom. And if we go back to page 2, we can see that there was discussion about governance issues on estate management boards. That's the title there. And we can see in the second paragraph that you say, first paragraph we'll start with. The new RA at Lancaster West are doing very well, and don't appear to be entertaining Eddie Defan and his followers. It has been noted that Eddie Defan is trying to put forward a motion of no confidence in the TMO and wants to start a new EMB. The EMB predated the TMO and their agreement was signed without legal advice. This, along with the fact that they were not transparent in their accounts, could work to our advantage, as they have £6,000 of debt outstanding. Just pausing there. Does that reflect the view at the time that an EMB was undesirable for the Lancaster West estate, so far as the TMO was concerned?
I had no involvement with the EMB and just didn't have a view, really. I knew there were historic issues and the EMB was being disbanded, but other than that, I knew no detail.
Very well. Now, looking at the next paragraph, it says, Peter Maddison noted that the Grenfell Compact is not set up as an RA. Councillor Blakeman and Eddie Defan are a negative force at Grenfell at present, and residents are going to them with problems and not us. Now, just on that, what was the significance of the Grenfell Compact not being a residents' association, strictly so called?
It's the point I've been making about the distinction between a residents' association, so an ongoing organisation as part of the resident engagement structure for Grenfell Tower, which I understand that Mr. Defan had been campaigning for some time, as opposed to being part of the Lancaster West Residents Association.
What did you mean by saying that Councillor Blakeman and Eddie Defan
Could I just finish that point
Yes,
before we go on to that one? Because the compact itself was a compact related to the works. It was a discrete consultation vehicle for the works, so it didn't have a broader remit in terms of the resident engagement strategy.
What did you mean by saying that Councillor Blakeman and Eddie Defan were a negative force at Grenfell at present?
So residents were going to them with problems, not us. So Councillor Blakeman had a very complicated role here, and I think found it difficult at times because she was a member of the council's Housing Property Scrutiny Committee, which gave scrutiny to issues that were related to housing. She was also a member of the TMO board, and what I felt was that instead of ensuring that scrutiny of our services to make sure that they were working effectively, she was telling residents that our systems weren't working effectively, and so as a result, the residents were more reluctant to use those systems than they should have been. And I think that caused a bit of poor communication. So some residents would go to Councillor Blakeman rather than reporting a repair or an issue directly to either Rydens or to the call centre, and that caused a bit of a short-circuiting of all of our systems, which meant that we couldn't sometimes resolve these things as quickly as we would like.
I could see that might be procedurally inefficient, but why was it negative? Use the word that's...
Well, I think it damaged the relationship between the residents and the TMO, and it made our systems more effective, and it increased the risk of things going wrong. But it also broke down the confidence that, things going wrong can sometimes be great opportunities to put things right and build confidence with people.
I mean, Councillor Blakeman was actually a TMO board member, wasn't she?
Yes.
So why was it a problem that she was trusted by the residents and not, quotes, us, unquotes, such that the residents went to her with their problems?
It wasn't the problem that she was trusted by the resident. It was the problem that her role as a member of the board should have been to give scrutiny to the processes of the TMO and make sure that we were held accountable if things weren't working effectively. And I felt that wasn't done in this instance.
Why did you think that residents were going to Councillor Blakeman with their problems rather than going to the TMO?
Can I just be clear? Some residents. It's a small number of. Although this did happen, and it was still a small number of residents. Most people would go to the established communications. I think that at some of the meetings and some of the communications, Councillor Blakeman would say that these systems don't work, and that would discourage people from using them.
Yeah, was there any truth in that?
Certainly, they wouldn't work if they weren't used effectively. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
No, well, that's because the answer to my question is circular. Was there any truth in Councillor Blakeman's statement that the systems don't work, and it was for that reason that residents were going to her?
There may have been instances where things went wrong, but the focus on fixing those issues needs to be through making sure the system works effectively.
Yes,
and that's really as a board member, that's really where Councillor Blakeman had the very good opportunity through the operations committee and through the board meetings to hold officers accountable. And I give monthly meetings to each of those committees, and Councillor Blakeman had an ideal opportunity to raise those concerns.
Coming back to my question, why did you think at the time, if you did think at the time about this, that the residents were going to Councillor Blakeman and Eddie Defan with their problems rather than the TMO?
I didn't think they were going to Eddie Defan with their problems. I thought it was Councillor Blakeman.
Well, it says here...
It says that, but I don't believe that's true.
Okay, well, rephrasing my question, why did you think at the time that residents were going to Councillor Blakeman with their problems rather than the TMO?
I think quantifying this is important. I think we're talking here about maybe a handful of people in a block of 120 homes. And so there were a small number of residents who would go directly to Councillor Blakeman, and that would make the process, because bearing in mind we had on site, Rydens had two resident liaison officers on site all the time for any issues that residents could contact those resident liaison officers, and issues could be resolved almost immediately. And then, there were, and that's what most people did. In a small number of cases, so we're probably talking 6 to 8 people had contacted Councillor Blakeman, and she took on that as casework. Right. But instead of taking on as casework, my preference would have been for her to have asked whether those people have reported their issue through the appropriate channels first before taking it on, and that would have been the quickest way of making sure that we got a repair carried out or got Rydens to attend site and address the issue. So I think it was more of a process issue here.
I mean, there's no indication in this record that the number of people going to Councillor Blakeman with their problems rather than the TMO is only a handful. On the contrary, the impression one gets reading this minute is that it was a problem. Negative force at Grenfell at present. Residents are going to them with problems and not us. Do you think that that's an accurate and reliable minute, or do you say that it overstates the problem materially?
I think it simplifies the problem, and I think that the detail of this can be seen in the review of the project that was carried out by the board, where it actually broke down the number of issues that were actually reported to Councillor Blakeman, and how many of those issues were were dealt with through that process.
Wasn't there a system in place in the TMO, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, whereby residents could actually raise concerns with their councillors directly,
Yes,
known as a members' inquiry?
yes.
Yeah. So the fact that some people were doing that with Councillor Blakeman, why would that be a problem if it was in fact part of the procedures which residents could use?
Normally, though, I would expect that residents would report an issue to a councillor through a members' inquiry if something's gone wrong. If it's the first point of contact, so something's broken and needs to be fixed, it would be better and simpler to report it direct to the call centre or to Rydens to carry out the repair, rather than raising it as a members' inquiry, which is more akin to dealing with it as a complaint. Whereas actually, that's the distinction I would make.
So in fact, it's right that there were actually two available routes for complaint for a resident. One is the complaints procedure, where it's a complaint properly so called, as opposed to an inquiry, and the other was directly to the councillor.
Yes.
I see. Looking at the next paragraph in this minute, it says Councillor Blakeman has also presented a petition with 60 signatures about our management at Grenfell and compensation for residents. Amanda Johnson feels that it is a conflict of interest for Councillor Blakeman, as she is a council-appointed TMO board member. Fellow Cofidio OK suggested that Amanda Johnson speaks to Laverne about this, as it needs to be urgently addressed. Why were there concerns about Councillor Blakeman presenting a petition on behalf of residents?
I don't remember the petition.
You don't remember the petition?
Specifically from this, I don't remember.
Right. Well, looking then at the question of the conflict of interest, if we can go back to the previous page, please, page 2. Amanda Johnson is recorded as saying that she felt that there was a conflict of interest. Do you know what the conflict of interest identified by Amanda Johnson was?
I don't remember.
Right. Was there an expectation that TMO board members would not question TMO employees, do you think?
No. I mean, the whole structure of the TMO board and the committees was to be accountable and to be held accountable by board members.
Right.
So I think that probably what Amanda's, I don't know, I can't guess. Right. I can't speculate on what Amanda was thinking.
Right. This may be a question for Ms Johnson, but can you explain how there could possibly have been a conflict of interest for Councillor Blakeman to represent the interests of residents if it was the case that the TMO existed to serve the residents?
Sorry, could you...
Well, how could there be a conflict of interest for Councillor Blakeman to seek to represent the interests of residents if the TMO existed to serve them?
I think this is a question for Amanda or for Fowler.
You were at the meeting. Were you puzzled by what this topic was about at
No,
the time?
I don't remember
Let's see.
thinking about it very deeply, I'm afraid.
I mean, do you accept that the residents were, and I use the word in inverted commas, customers of the TMO?
Sorry?
Do you accept that the residents were, quotes, customers, unquotes,
Yes.
of the TMO? And do you accept that it was the TMO's role to provide your customers with the best service and satisfaction you could, acknowledge your errors and try and find solutions?
Yes.
Did it occur to you at the time, maybe you can't remember, that Amanda Johnson's very suggestion of a conflict of interest on the part of Councillor Blakeman revealed an us and them culture at the TMO?
I think there was some complications in the way that Councillor Blakeman interacted, because she had three. She was a local ward councillor, she was a member of the TMO board, and she was she sat on the council's property and scrutiny committee. And I think that there are subtleties around that relationship, which I think Councillor Blakeman struggled with.
Do you remember discussing those at the time with anybody?
I've raised those sort of issues a number of times with the company secretary, because I felt that there were times where Councillor Blakeman could have been helping bring about a resolution rather than, whereas I felt that at times she created the divide.
Right. What were the subtleties around the relationship, as you put it, that she struggled with?
Well, I think I think that so I think her role as a board member and as a member of the member of the operations committee too, she was in a position to be able to hold TMO officers to account and ensure that our services were working as effectively for residents as possible. And I felt that sometimes her actions meant that residents were less inclined to have confidence in our services because of the negative portrayal of Councillor Blakeman of those services. And I don't think that portrayal was accurate. I had a number of bits of correspondence with Councillor Blakeman directly about these sort of issues. And sometimes she would produce minutes of meetings without any agreement that would be inaccurate. They would be saying that I'd agreed things that I hadn't agreed. And I had dialogues with Councillor Blakeman on these sort of things. So it was about sending out clear messages, really, because she had more than one hat as a councillor and as a member of the TMO board. And I felt that it's very difficult if you've got a board member and a ward councillor who is saying this is what's been agreed when it actually wasn't what had been agreed with me at all. So they're the sort of things that I think were very difficult, and it was causing distrust.
But do you accept that there could only be a conflict of interest as between the TMO and a councillor representing the interests of the residents if there was in fact a conflict between those divergent interests?
I'm sorry, I don't know that I can comment on that.
All right. Mr. Chairman, is that an appropriate moment for a break?
Yes, Mr. Millett, I think it is. We'll have a break now, Mr. Maddison. We'll come back, please, at 20 to 12. And as before, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it while you're out of the room.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you. Thank you. 20 to 12, please. Do ask Mr. Maddison to come back in, please. All right, Mr. Maddison, ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Yes, Mr. Maddison. Can I ask you, please, now to go to RBK 3032130? This is a minute of a meeting of the Housing and Property Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of January 2016. As you can see from the top right-hand corner of the document, and we can see that you were in attendance, 5 names up from the bottom of the others in attendance list. Do you have an independent recollection of this meeting? Just to jog your memory, it was a meeting at which Mr. Defarn addressed the committee.
Yes.
You do. Now, if we go please to page 4, we can see that you yourself made a presentation to the committee on the subject of the Grenfell Tower refurbishment project. If you look at page 5, you can see the outcome of the discussion. Right at the foot of the section, just before A5, you see that it says, in conclusion, the chairman agreed that a working group would be commissioned at some point in the future, but that this was dependent on a number of factors, including the conclusion of existing working groups and the review work conducted by the TMO. If you go back up the page a little bit further, you'll see the previous paragraph says, Councillor Blakeman said to the committee that a number of people did not understand the complaints procedure and often things had been implemented before the complaint had been addressed. She explained that there was no mechanism for collective complaints, for example, when a lift wasn't operational or lack of CCTV. The chairman asked if there was a procedure for collective complaints or if each individual had to log a complaint separately. He suggested there may be a gap in governance in this respect, as there should be a process to allow a group to complain and permit the aggregation of a complaint. He recommended this. He recommended that the TMO look at their procedures in this regard. Mr. Black agreed to do this. Now, can we take it from the minutes that the main issue there identified was the lack of a process for collective complaints? Yes?
Yes.
But also that any review would depend on the outcome of a review by Mr. Black and by the TMO board itself.
Yes.
Yes. Now, moving on from this, then, can we go to TMO 00852-865? This is an email to you from Sasha Jevons of the 3rd of March 2016. There it is. Copied to others, and including Yvonne Birch. Subject, Grenfell Board Review. And she says, hi, I summarise the outcome of the scoping meeting and clarify what information is required in the pack and what information should be covered in the presentation. I've split it into the sections from Eddie's speech, paperwork for the pack, colon, and then a list. Now, just placing this in its chronological context, is it right that this is now early March, there had been a scoping meeting to scope out the, in loose terms of reference, for the TMO board review of the complaints made by Mr. Defarn? Is that right?
I don't remember.
You don't remember. Right. So you don't remember what she means by the scoping meeting there?
No.
Oh, okay. Right. In the first block, under 1, she says resident engagement, and she wants, among other things, first bullet, or asterisk, timeline of all the resident consultation meetings that took place. And then 6 down, you can see she wants minutes of any consultation or compact meeting. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, let's just see how this proceeds. Can we go, please, to TMO 10044-817, page 2. This is an email from you to Gillian Kennedy, which, if you go over to page 3, you can see you're forwarding David Collins's email to Claire Williams, asking for a meeting to discuss the construction works. That's his 6th of April email. But just so that's the context. If we go to page 1 of this email run, you say to her, second email down on page 1, 4th of March 2016, "Hi Gillian, on reflection, I'm not sure that I want to go into so much detail on the compact strand. I think I will produce a summary report with a timeline, schedule of meetings, and brief summary of the issues." So this has sort of come in on an email chain from the year before, but is the day after Sasha Jevons's email to you with her shopping list of things from the scoping meeting. That's the chronology. Now, what I want to ask you about is the text of your email to Gillian Kennedy. Is it right Gillian Kennedy was coordinating the TMO board's review? Do you remember that?
I don't know if she was or not, or whether she was just pulling together some of the pieces from my team or from Sasha's team.
Right, all right. Now let's go to the text on page 1 I want to ask you about on the screen. What was the problem with giving the board the detailed records, such as they were, of the meetings, rather than your own brief summary, as you were suggesting here?
I'm not sure. I don't have any recollection of this.
Right. Were you looking to omit things?
No, certainly not.
Were you looking to present them in a particular way?
No, I mean, is there a previous email to this giving me a bit of context? Because I can't really remember what we were talking about.
Right. Yes, there is, and I've shown it to you. It's the email of the 3rd of March, the day before, from Sasha Jevons to you, asking you for the minutes of any consultation or compact meetings. And you seem to be sending this back to Gillian Kennedy, saying, and as I've shown you the text, "I'm not sure I want to go into so much detail on the compact strand. I think I'll produce a summary report with a timeline, schedule of meetings, and a brief summary of the issues discussed." And I just wanted to know why that was.
I have no idea.
Right. We do see that that is something to which she agrees. If you go to the top of page 1, she just says, "Hi Peter, will do. I'm just updating the summary of issues, then we'll send over."
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that some of the minutes, for want of a better word, of the compact meetings might be a set of exchanges of emails. So it might be easier, rather than giving people a whole set of email interchanges, to summarise the points. That's all I can imagine.
Right. You're imagining. You don't remember.
I don't remember.
Right. Let's look then at TMO 00829-803. This is the final pack on the consultation subject, presented to the TMO board as part of the review. And if we look at the mini chronology on that page, we can see that what is sent is meeting notes and actions 16th July 2016. So that's the first date on which these documents begin, and runs down to February 2016. Is it right that you decided not to include David Collins's emails of the 17th of March and 25th of March 2015 and the 6th of April email that I've shown you just now in relation to the matters he was raising?
I don't think I made a conscious decision not to. I mean, I think these are, strictly speaking, the notes of the compact meetings, right. And they weren't compact meetings. That was a dialogue with an individual.
Do you remember receiving emails in March from David Collins, or seeing them at the time, sent to Claire Williams requesting recognition of Grenfell Community Unite?
Yes, I do remember.
Yes. Do you know why you didn't put those into the pack sent to the TMO board to review?
I don't.
Right. Do you remember making a conscious decision to leave them out?
No.
Nor did you include the minutes of the residents' meetings, which were enclosed in those emails, did you?
I don't think I wasn't aware we had records of resident meetings other than these.
Right. Well, let's just look at a reference, chase this down. TMO 100448821, please. This is an email, in fact, which you sent to yourself in March 2016, just a day or two, in fact, the next day, actually, after you had decided not to send the minutes of the meeting, but to do a summary instead. You see, this is the chronology. And you send it to yourself, but below it we can see March 2015. And if you scroll down, you can see at the bottom of page 1, you've got Claire Williams's email to you of the 26th of March. Over the page to page 2, she tells you had minutes of the meeting. And then you can see, perhaps if we scroll, down to page, it's quite a long email, but we can look at it starting at page 2. You can see this is David Collins's email of the 25th of March to Claire Williams. Hi Claire, Ed's provided the minutes of the residents' meeting. See below, can you respond on all points raised, etc. It's quite a long email, and then the minutes appear at page 2 and go on over through to page 5, actually bottom of page, to top of page 6. So you had in front of you this document, it appears, at the time when you were considering putting together, or assisting on the putting together of the pack for the TMO board's review. Just showing you that again. Do you remember making a conscious decision, revisiting that document of the year before, to leave it out of the pack?
No.
Can you explain why you left it out of the pack?
I wasn't putting the pack together, but I don't have any recollection. Could you just show me my first email?
Yes.
One where I sent it to myself?
Yes, it's page 1, very top, 5th of March 2016. So the chronology is that Sasha Jevons writes to you on the 3rd of March.
Can I just see the bit below that?
Of course. If you ask for the...
Could I see the bit, sorry, where Claire says Peter?
Yes, bottom of page 1 over to the top of page 2. I think that's where we want to go. And then the third paragraph is where the minutes start, on page 2. This is the email from David Collins. Is that what you want to look at?
No, I was trying to... I've got no recollection of this, I'm afraid.
I mean, take your time and look at it if it helps.
I don't think it's going to remind me.
Okay. All right. So, do you agree, though, that the net effect of leaving out this document from the package was to omit residents' concerns about the refusal to meet with residents between March 2015 and July 2015?
I don't know whether that was included in the pack or not. I have no idea.
Now, let's go then to a different document, MET 00045762, please. This is the matrix of complaints or issues. The first of 2, this one's dated August 2015. There was a later one in May 2016, into which Councillor Blakeman had input. This document was also not provided to the TMO board. Do you know why that was?
No.
Did you know that the TMO board had concluded that there were only 7 complaints about the refurbishment, but this document, do you agree, would suggest that there were rather more?
Well, not necessarily. So I think the 7 formal complaints were under the definition of the policy were issues that weren't resolved, whereas this was a dialogue between myself and the compact, regarding issues that they'd raised. And so this, I would hope that some of these things were agreed, so it wasn't a complaint, it was something that was agreed and some stuff that we'd already done. So this was part of a dialogue between myself and the residents of the compact.
Yes. Was it not important for the TMO board, when conducting their review, to have seen this document?
I think it would have been useful, yes.
It would have been useful. It would have been essential, no?
I think it would have helped.
Right. TMO 008307559, please. This is the minute of a review meeting on the 12th of March 2016. Now, do you remember attending this? You're not listed there.
No, I attended because we did a tour of the building, and so I was there to do a tour of the building, but I didn't sit in the panel itself.
I see. So you were there to tell them about the tour?
To conduct the tour, yes.
Oh, I see. So, forgive me, you said to conduct the tour. Tell me how the day went. There was a review meeting. It looks as if it was held in the boardroom. But did you leave the boardroom and go to the tower?
Yes.
And how long did you spend at the tower?
A couple of hours, I'd have thought.
Did you speak to anybody at the tower?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Did you speak to any residents?
I don't remember.
Was there any system set up whereby you could meet the residents and get their views face to face during this review tour?
I don't remember what the format of the meeting was at all.
Okay. Did you have, or had you had, any discussion with Sasha Jevons about which of, if any, residents the TMO board should meet?
No, I don't remember.
Do you know why the board didn't meet with Grenfell Compact or any member of Grenfell Compact when conducting the review?
I don't.
Let's see if we can look at another document and prompt your recollection of this. Can we please look at Judith Blakeman's police statement, MET 3045751, please? I'll show you the first page, and then go to page 9. That's the first page of her statement, dated 28th of June 2019. Can we go to page 9 in that, please, and look down at the second paragraph? She says there, in the second line, I understand that this review was carried out on a Saturday, starting with a desktop review of some of the associated paperwork. After the desktop review, the subcommittee visited Grenfell Tower, although I believe that they did not speak to any of the residents who had complained about the works to their flats. Further, I believe they only looked at the new flats that had been created on the new lower floors and not the original flats, including those of which complaints had been made. They did look at the other new additions to the tower, the nursery and the boxing club. The report also said that only 7 complaints had been made during the refurbishment. Is it right that the review group didn't, in fact, speak to any residents as part of its investigation, as she said?
I don't remember. I have got recollection of going into residents' homes with other parties, and I just can't remember whether we did it as part of this or not.
Right. You can't recall. Was there a decision beforehand about which flats you should and which flats you shouldn't, or wouldn't, or weren't going to visit?
I'd have thought whatever the itinerary would have had to have been set in advance and agreed. So
Exactly. Would you remember that?
I wouldn't have been organising it, so I was literally just there to help with the orientation around the building.
Her recollection, as I've read to you, is that the group only looked at the new flats on the lower floors and not the original ones, in respect of which complaints had been made.
As I say, I wasn't...
Do you say she's wrong about that? My question is, do you say she's wrong about that?
I don't know. Right. Councillor Blakeman wasn't there, so...
Now, it's right, that isn't it, that residents had no other input into the TMO board internal review before it was submitted to the board?
As I say, I wasn't involved in it. I don't know.
Right. But from what you could see and did know about, which, as you've told us, seems to have been quite limited, from that perspective, is it right that residents had no other input into the TMO board internal review?
I can only say I don't know.
Right. Now, can I ask you about a slightly different topic? TMO 00852-922, please. This is a brief self-contained topic about this meeting. This is a meeting of the TMO or joint ET-SMT meeting on the 14th of April 2016, at which you're present. You can see your name in the list on page 1 there. And if we go to page 6, please, there's an agenda item, item number 7, which is AOB, and it says there, RB, elections coming up, Janet and Fowler to do feedback on the resident capacity training, Faye restarting, Anne Cush not said, Brendan not, Deborah not well, Tony retiring, Peter Chapman retiring. Maria has showed us the problem of not getting good quality candidates. Is Eddie Defan a member? What if he put himself forward? Do you know of any good person? Please put their names forward. Do you remember what the problem was concerning identifying good quality candidates?
I don't.
What would be a good quality candidate, do you know?
I'm sure there was a specification for the role, but that was something that the executive team and the company secretary would be involved in.
Right. Can you explain why it was that the question was asked, is Eddie Defan a member, what if he put himself forward?
I don't.
Was there a plan to prevent him from becoming a candidate for the TMO board?
I've got no idea.
Was there a risk or a view that he might?
I've no idea.
You don't know. Can we just look very briefly at the next document, TMO 00852-958, please? I should, before you leave that, you'll note it's a draft. I'll show you the final version, or a further draft. Here's the next document, also a draft. If we go to page 4, we can see under AOB that the reference to Eddie Defan has been removed, or rather, it isn't there. Can you explain why that is so?
No.
Can we then turn to a different topic, please, which is the complaints process itself. Can I take you to TMO 00831-399? This is the complaints policy, which we looked at, I think, last week. And the policy itself starts on page 2. And if you look at paragraph 1.1, I showed you that last week. If we then scroll down to page 5, you can see that there is the complaints procedure itself, and you identify the 3 stages, or you don't, but this document does, identify the 3 stages to the complaints procedure, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then after that. And then on page 8, there's a diagram, complaints procedure diagram, with the 3 steps in it. And then at page 9, you've got the complaints guidance for staff. Were you familiar with the complaints guidance for staff as a document?
No.
You weren't? Did you ever look at it?
I don't recall.
You don't recall ever looking at it?
No. I'd have been briefed by the complaints team about the policy and the approach, but I wouldn't necessarily have read this.
Right. Looking at paragraph 1.1, it says, we expect all managers to be familiar with the complaints policy and associated procedures, and as appropriate ensure that their staff understand the procedure and their role in applying it effectively and in line with the organisation's values and behaviours. You may not have been familiar with the text, but were you familiar with the principle
Yes.
encapsulated in paragraph 1.1? You were. How would you describe, or how do you describe, your role in responding to residents' complaints?
My role was about ensuring that complaints were resolved as quickly and effectively as possible. So I had an overview of the complaints that came into my team.
Right.
And I had a role in, it would vary depending on various circumstances, but I would have a role of generally overviewing and ensuring that complaints were dealt with promptly and efficiently.
Right, let me just understand that evidence a bit more closely. You say your role was about ensuring that complaints were resolved. So you had an overview of the complaints that came into your team. That's the assets and regeneration team.
Yes.
Did you have a wider role in overseeing the operation of the complaints procedures and policies generally?
No, that was so. There was an independent complaints team.
Yes.
So there was a team of 3 people, as I remember, who managed the process, and they reported into the director of property and the director of people.
Director of people. Sorry. Who was
Yeah. So it was Yvonne Birch. I can't
Right.
remember exactly her title.
Did Yvonne Birch or her team ever challenge you on you or your team's decisions about complaints?
Yes, they would have scrutiny and overview of all of the process and would comment.
Right.
Sometimes some complaints would go across departments, so there needs to be a bit of coordination at times as well.
So when a formal complaint was raised about your group, your department, were you the one responsible ultimately for responding to that complaint, or was that investigated independently?
Sorry, could you ask that again?
Yes, when a formal complaint was raised about your group or your department, were you the one ultimately responsible for responding to the complaint, or was it investigated independently?
It depends on the nature of the complaint to some extent, but generally, if a complaint came in about a piece of work that was being carried out, the head of service responsible for that area would generally deal with that complaint. And I would have an overview I wouldn't necessarily see all complaints, but I would have an overview of how many complaints there were and how quickly they were responded to. And if they were escalated through the process, I would generally deal with stage 2 complaints. But sometimes there's a bit of fluidity around that.
Right. So is it right that the head of service would respond to complaints about the service for which they were responsible?
Yes.
I see. So on what occasions would there ever be independent investigation of the complaint?
Well, there was independent scrutiny throughout, through the complaints team, so they would review all complaints. So there was always some scrutiny. But to get the matter resolved as quickly as possible, the head of service would be the person who would enable that whatever issue was being raised to be addressed as effectively and as quickly as possible.
Now, looking at paragraph 2.1 on this page, under roles and responsibilities, we can see the role of the complaints team, their responsibilities, and at paragraph 2.2, managers' responsibilities. And that includes, if you look at it, investigating complaints. If we turn to page 10, third bullet point down, now at the top of your screen, investigating complaints and identifying appropriate actions to remedy any service failure. How are you expected to investigate any complaint?
It depends on the nature of the complaint, really, but normally it would be about gathering information and understanding what the issue is and coming to a resolution as to how it best could be resolved.
Did that include meeting with the complainant in order to find out more details about the subject matter?
Sometimes, or commonly speaking to the complainant.
Looking at paragraph 3.1, resolving complaints, KCTMO expects that when we have got something wrong, that we acknowledge this and promptly rectify the problem and notify the complainant accordingly. We understand that sometimes staff may view a complaint as a personal criticism. This is not usually the intention from the complainant's perspective. They usually just want something done about what it is that they are complaining about. As such, it's important that staff do not respond negatively and defensively, but instead look at the opportunity that might arise from a complaint to improve the services we provide. Did you understand, even if you weren't familiar with the text here, that principle?
Yes, and I agree.
You agree? And if we go down to page 11, we could see paragraph 4.1 under the heading Recording and Monitoring the Complaint. Anyone who receives what they think is a complaint is responsible for promptly forwarding this to the complaints team via phone or email to complaints@kctmo.org.uk. On receipt of the complaints team will usually identify whether it is a complaint or a service request, contact the complainant within 2 working days to acknowledge receipt, ensure they understand the complaint, and let the complainant know what will happen next. Did you send all possible complaints, or by which I mean all complaints that potentially qualified as complaints, to the complaints team as a matter of practice?
Yes, they would normally come via the complaints team.
Did the complaints team provide guidance on whether the matter was in fact a complaint, properly so called, or a service request, properly so called?
Yes, broadly.
Now, against that general background, let's look at TMO 00831-285. I just want to look at a particular complaint from GTLA. This one is 9th of November 2013. And we start on page 5 of this email run, please, which has that date on it. And it's an email on the second half of that page from the Grenfell Tower Leaseholders Association, dated 9th November, to Robert Black, and copied to a list of people you can see in blue there on the screen. And you say, or it is said, to Mr. Black, if you turn the page, "Dear Mr. Robert Black, and then underneath that, it says, we write to you in reference to the email dated 14th October 2013, instead of Mr. Peter Maddison, due to the fact that he has joined the KCTMO early this year, and our issues and concerns we submitted to the complaint procedure, stage 2, almost decade-old complaints. We expect either you to deal with it, and we are also very much exhausted to deal with Mr. Daniel Wood and Janice Pretorius of Home Ownership Department and their lack of commitment and arrogance to deal with our serious issues and concerns." Now, there's then a long list of topics which go on over the next few pages, including, I should just pick up at page 7, refurbishment of Grenfell Tower, as one of the topics towards the bottom of your screen. And just picking this point up while we're on it, in the 7th line down, they say it's logical to consult the residents and the stakeholders of LWE on design, but also not so much about the colour of the cladding and the window that must be left over to the designer. If TMO want the CALC project to complement GTRP, there has been more consultation on the design of GTRP than the CALC project, when in fact the KCTMO have messed up the planning application 7 times. And then there's the various other matters discussed in relation to the refurbishment. That's just as an example of what's being raised here. And then if we go back to page, foot of page 4, over to the top of page 5, where the email starts and splits, you can see that at the bottom of page 4, you send this email to Robert Black, or rather you write to Robert Black, and over the top of page 5 you say, "Robert, we have agreed with RBKC that we will direct Mr. Aduweru," you misspelled his name, "through our complaints procedure. We have been through stages 1 and 2, and this should be treated as a stage 3 complaint." My question is, having shown you all of that, who decided that the complaint would be directed through the complaints procedure?
I don't know.
You say here that we have been through stages 1 and 2. Is that correct?
I don't recall this. I'm not sure specifically related to this. I mean, I must have formed that view for some reason. I mean, we must have responded.
Right.
And the way that the Leaseholder Association communicated, as you can see, was to copy a broad range of people in. And I think that sounds to me as if there's been a conversation here about, obviously it's been copied into more than one organisation as well, so there's obviously been a conversation about which is the most appropriate route to deal with the issues being raised.
If we go to page 2 in this email chain, after some discussions with Joanna Burke about it being a 3-stage process, if we go to page 2, we can see that here is an email from you to Janet Seward and Joanne Burke and Daniel Wood of the 14th of November 2013, and it says, Janet, attached to the stage 1 and 2 responses to Mr. Awaderu, I also attached the various correspondence which we've received from him. It looks from that as if, in fact, this complaint or set of complaints had actually been through stages 1 and 2, and you were on top of that. Is that right?
It looks like it looks like there's been a stage 1 and stage 2 response. I don't know who did those responses.
Right. So you don't remember doing them yourself? Or dealing with them yourself?
Without seeing the specifics, I've no recollection.
Do you know what investigations had been carried out into the heads of complaint raised by the GTLA?
It would be all detailed in the correspondence with the GTLA.
Do you know what the difference was between the stage 1 and stage 2 processes, so far as these complaints were concerned?
Well, I understood what stage 1 and stage 2 processes were, yes.
No, that's not my question.
I don't remember the specifics of these. I mean, if I could see if I could see the correspondence, I might be able to help, but I can't remember them.
My question is really whether you can remember anything and help me beyond the correspondence, but you can't.
I'd have to see the correspondence. I mean, this is nearly 10 years ago, and there was a lot of correspondence.
Can we go to TMO 00831285, please? And if we go to page 4 in that email run, you can see that this is an email which says, and this is within the chain we're looking at, Joanne, it's from Joanne Burke to you of the 11th of November. Dear Peter, our stage 3 process involves a review by a panel of people who have no previous involvement with the complaint. This would normally be the CEO or director, resident board member, and a council-appointed or independent board member. The review should be completed within 28 days. However, due to the complexity of this case and possible housing ombudsman involvement, it is my view that we seek an independent review. Our policy states we can offer this at any stage of the process. What are your thoughts? And your response to this is just above that. If we scroll up, please, higher up, page 4. Joanne, I don't think that this case is particularly complicated. There are actually very few tangible issues raised in the correspondence. I think it would be very helpful to have a stage 3 panel that comprising a KCTMO director, a rep from RBKC, Amanda Johnson, ? And an independent board member. Why were you, as it appears from this, reluctant to have an independent review at this stage, as opposed to a stage 3 panel?
I don't remember.
Some of GTLA's concerns were long-standing and related to a number of different areas relating to TMO's management of Grenfell Tower. Do you accept that it could have been helpful to have had an independent view, an independent voice on the management issues raised by the GTLA at that stage?
And the bit of I mean, I don't remember the detail, the specifics of the correspondence. The bit you showed me was specifically regarding the design of the building, and that was something that actually I felt that the GTLA were concerned of lack of progress, and felt that the consultation that we were carrying out as part of the design of the building was, I think in their words, was time wasting rather than we should be getting on and doing the work, which was really the thrust of their concerns.
Well, I showed you the bit about the refurbishment, and that it wasn't only about progress but input into design. But let's go back to it. Let's go back to the list at page 6. And I'll take you just through the headings. We've got the email of the 6th of August 2013. We've got, under item 2, the relationship between Lancaster West Estate Management Board and TMO, going back to the 2009 report. Do you remember the 2009 Memoli report?
Well, no, I wasn't there in 2009.
No, I know, but do you remember?
No.
Do you remember finding out about it when you arrived?
No.
Are you familiar with the 2009 report at all?
No.
So when you got this document, you didn't ask anybody the question, well, what is the 2009 report?
Well, I wouldn't have been dealing with that part of this correspondence. So the issue about the relationship between various parts of the organisation would have been dealt with either through the resident engagement team or through the company secretary in terms of the governance arrangements. But I would have no direct. So in a way, some of these complaints or some of these communications from the GTLA were quite broad. Some of the issues were quite old.
Yes.
And so you said that, I think that was an issue as well. So it was referring to some issues that had occurred maybe 10 years ago, which were either been addressed previously through the complaints procedure or were timed out in accordance with the policy.
Well, let's just, since you asked, let's keep going with the list. Bottom of page 6, heating and hot water system. Item 4 is refurbishment of Grenfell Tower, we looked at. Item 5 was the 30th of April 2010 fire, which broke out at Grenfell Tower, in which there was a problem. 6 is cleaning. 8 was the power surges. This doesn't seem to be a 7, although I think it's estate garden management. 8 was power surge in May 2013, and you'll remember that and a lot about that. So yes. These issues are numerous, widespread and historic. My question again, do you accept, sitting here today, that it would have been helpful to have had an independent view on the management issues raised in this email?
I didn't have a view. I felt that an independent view was going to be gained through the route that I proposed. I hadn't, and it was for the complaints team to recommend what would be an appropriate route to best resolve these issues.
Going back to page 2 is your email to Janet Seward, 14th November. I showed you this a minute ago. Let's look at the third paragraph in this, which I didn't show you, but I will now. You say, when you've had a chance to review this, would you like to let us know how you would like to take this forward? For instance, would you like Daniel and I to draft responses to the relevant parts of Mr. Awaderu's latest email? What were the relevant parts of Mr. Awaderu's email?
So Daniel is Daniel Wood, who's the head of home ownership. So a significant number of the issues that were being raised by Mr. Awaderu were related to service charges and the service that he was being charged for through his service charge. So some of these issues were going to be dealt with through my team. So, for example, the Grenfell refurbishment project and the power surges, they were issues that my team had dealt with. All of the others were dealt with, were primarily were relating to the service for which Daniel Wood, as head of home ownership, was responsible for. So really what I was trying to do was to ask the person who had the overview of the complaints procedure to give some direction as to how they wanted to coordinate those bits, because it wasn't one person one service that was responsible here.
Janet Seward was in the complaints team.
She was the senior manager, and so the complaints team, the head of complaints, Joanne Burke, reported to Janet Seward.
Right. Now, you're offering to draft responses to the relevant parts. Did you expect to provide draft responses even before the Stage 3 panel had convened?
I don't know that it was responses to Mr. Awaderu or reports on the relevant bits. I mean, that's what I'm asking Janet, is how does she want to coordinate this? Because this was quite a multifaceted and complex piece of correspondence.
Well, you're not offering to set out your view in relation to a Stage 3 independent panel investigation. You're offering to draft responses to the relevant parts of Mr. Awaderu's latest email. My question again, did you intend to provide the draft responses to Mr. Awaderu's complaints even before the Stage 3 panel had convened?
No.
So what are you offering then when you say, would you like Daniel and I to draft responses to the relevant parts of Mr. Awaderu's latest email?
I think drafting responses doesn't mean replying to the actual complaint. It means pulling together briefing packs and information that the panel could consider, I assume.
Well, it doesn't read that way, does it?
Sometimes emails are written in very short notice on the hoof, and I think...
Right. Can we take it that you would have expected the Stage 3 panel to agree with what you put in your response to the complaint?
No.
Was the fact that you wanted to, or were offering to draft responses to Mr. Awaderu's email, or at least the relevant parts of it, a reason why you preferred not to hold an independent review?
Holding the independent review wasn't my call. It was the view. No. That was the call of the complaints team.
But you weren't supporting it, though, were you? It had been suggested, but you didn't embrace it.
If they decided that that was the most appropriate way of dealing with it, then I would have embraced that.
Then we continue up this email chain, please, to the foot of page 1. We can't see a reply from Janet Seward to you. But if we go to the foot of page 1 and over to page 2, we can see a further email from you on the 27th of November 2013 to Janet Seward, copied to, among other people, to Sasha Jevons. Dear Janet, following our catch-up last week, I'm resending Mr. Awaderu's original correspondence relating to his Stage 3 complaint. As we discussed, it would be sensible to have Amanda Johnson involved in the panel. We also agreed that you would prepare a report detailing the outcome of your review of the case and giving a summary of the key issues that the panel may want to consider when making their decision. Has a date been set for the review hearing? Can we have sight of the report that you will send to accompany the pack? I think that Yvonne and/or Sasha should have a chance to review this before it's issued. Had you discussed with Janet Seward your intention to provide a response to the panel?
I don't... Where does it say that I was doing that? Sorry.
Well, looking at the second paragraph, we also agreed that you would prepare a report detailing the outcome of your review of the case and giving a summary of the key issues that the panel may want to consider when making their decision.
So that's Janet Seward, not me, that's producing that report?
Yes. Had you discussed with Janet Seward your intention, certainly as encompassed in or implied by your question there, that the panel should have a response?
No.
So what was the subject of the agreement then?
A briefing. I'm assuming that what was agreed is that Janet would prepare a report detailing the outcome of the review of the case. So she would produce a written report with the evidence that could be reviewed by the Stage 3 panel, I assume.
Right. And you asked for a sight of the report. Why did you want to see that?
Just to ensure it was correct and we had everything in there that was relevant.
I see. And why did you expect Yvonne and Sasha to have a chance to review it? What if you
For the same reason, to make sure that it was complete.
Right. What would Sasha Jevons know about the report that she could add to or subtract from or comment on?
I don't know. I can't remember who had dealt with the stage 1 and the stage 2 issues here. Without seeing the detail of that, I can't really remember.
Right. Well, maybe we'll come back to that question later. Did you want to control the information that was put before the stage 3 panel?
Only to the extent that it was important that all the correct information was there.
When you say the correct information, do you mean factually correct or correct from the point of view of what it was that you wanted them to see?
Factually correct.
I see. So is this right? That you just wanted to make sure that any statements of fact that were in that report were complete and accurate?
That they had all of the information on which they could base a judgment. So they were reviewing the information that had been provided.
Right. At all events, do you accept that you had, or were at least looking to have, input into all 3 stages of the complaints process for this complaint?
Well, I haven't seen stage 1 or stage 2, so I can't really comment on what involvement I had at either of those stages. And at
Right.
stage 3, all I'm trying to ensure is that the panel get all of the information. So that's not having input, it's making sure that they have the information on which they can consider their decision.
Well, I'm not sure I follow. If you had not had input into stage 1 and stage 2, how would you be able to know whether the report detailing the outcome of the review so far was accurate?
Sorry, I don't follow the question.
Well,
but
the question is, let me just
But
put it-
your question was that do I accept that I was involved at stage 1, 2 and 3? I haven't seen who's written what at stage 1 and stage 2.
No, Mr. Maddison, because I haven't spent the time going through all of that with you, because otherwise we'd be here till Thursday next week.
Okay. In which case, I'm sorry, I can't answer
I
the
think
question.
you can.
Okay.
I'm trying to short-circuit it. You can help me. Do you accept that had you not been involved in stage 1 or stage 2, you wouldn't have needed to, and in fact would not have been able to provide any input into the report thus far to make sure that it was complete and accurate?
I'm sorry, I don't really follow there. All I was trying to do here is to ensure that we had the right information so that people could make the correct review and make sure that we got the right decision to that complaint. And that right decision is either it's upheld and we agree a set of action, or it's not upheld and we agree why. And it's about giving clarity in this process. So as part of that, yes, I would see my role as ensuring that I get as much of the information so that that independent panel can review that process.
Well, if you hadn't been involved in the stage 1 or stage 2 process, what input would you be able to give into ensuring that the report about the complaint review so far was complete and accurate?
I'm assuming that I was involved because I had some knowledge of some of the information that was going on at this stage, and it's clear that some of the issues certainly related to the power surges I'd had extensive involvement with, both in terms of engaging with residents, but also in terms of communicating to the council and to the Property Scrutiny Committee and our board. So I was just making sure that all of that relevant information was available so that the panel could consider whether the appropriate decision had been made.
I mean, it is certainly the case from the records that you were involved in the stage 2 complaint. We can look at that if you need to. Do you not recall that independently?
I don't.
Let's just quickly look then at TMO 00846643. This is your letter. Let me make that good. If you turn to page 2, your name is at the bottom. Yours sincerely, Peter Maddison. And if we go to page 1, we can see that this is a letter of the 14th of October 2013 to Mr. Amaderu, Vice Chairman of GTLA. Mr. Amaderu, stage 2 complaint. Thank you for your email dated 29th September. I'm considering your complaint to be considered at stage 2 of the KCTMO complaints procedure. And then you set out your response to it. So without going into the details, you can see that you were involved in stage 2, yes?
Yeah.
Yes, and then if we look at the penultimate paragraph on that page, you say you have not specified issues that you feel have not been properly addressed in the stage 1 response. I've reviewed the stage 1 response, and given the evidence provided to date, I would confirm that I agree with Joanne Burke's decision not to uphold your complaint. So it looks as if from this, Joanne Burke had dealt with the complaint at stage 1, you had dealt with it at stage 2, and we're now looking to have input into stage 3.
Having input is overstating my involvement. It's making sure that the panel had the information to allow them to make the decision.
Do you accept that you were involved in reviewing stage 1 at stage 2 and involved in some respects, as we've seen from this email chain, in stage 3?
I would have naturally I would have reviewed the stage 1 response at stage 2. That is part of the process, is
Indeed.
to make sure.
Indeed.
And so I've responded to stage 2, and I was communicating with the complaints team to ensure that the panel had the correct information to allow them to review that decision.
Now let's turn to a different topic. I want to ask you about a complaint now by Mr. Defan about fire safety in 2014. Can we start by looking, please, at TMO 1000753? This is a series of emails about complaints made about access to the building in 2014. If we scroll down to the start of where I want to show you at page 7 in this email run, we can see here that there is an email from Mr. Defan, an email from Mr. Dewis, Ben Dewis of London Fire Brigade, to Janice Ray of the 8th of July 2014, which he sends to her, in which he says, "Dear Janice, I received this email below from an Edward Defan, who you may be aware of, who lives at Grenfell Tower." And then within the email is set Mr. Defan's email to Ben Dewis of the LFB. And if we go up the chain, well, let's look at the topic. I should show you the topic. He says, "Dear Ben, please be advised that residents of Grenfell Tower are very concerned about fire safety after the recent closure of a land and rights of way to the west and north of Grenfell Tower. We're also very concerned that we have no idea where to assemble should there be a fire in Grenfell Tower, as there is no open space in the vicinity that is available to our community. Please can you help ensure that the fire brigade will monitor the current changes on the Lancaster West estate that impact on our fire safety? And could you also inform us where we should assemble in the event of a fire? Thank you for your assistance." And now if we look up the chain, please, we can see that there is an exchange of emails between Ben Dewis and Janice Ray, particularly foot of page 5 over to page 6, just to give you the context in the string of emails, and then scrolling up to page 4, further emails between Janice Ray and Ben Dewis, and then if we arrive at an email on page 4 from Janice Ray, 1st of September, copied to Claire Williams on the same subject of fire safety. And then if we go to page 2, we can see that Janice Ray writes to Claire Williams and you on the 4th of September 2014. "Peter and Claire, as discussed, I asked Ben Dewis, LFB Inspection Officer, if he would provide us with a copy of his response to Mr. Defan, or at least a summary of his response. Please see me email and his response below. Do you need me to go back to him?" And your response is on page 1. So I'm sorry about the long run-up to that, but I wanted to make sure you had the full context. And you say this to Janice Ray and Claire Williams. "As we discussed briefly, I think Mr. Defan's blog is scaremongering and could be quite frightening to residents. I think we need to send out a very clear message to residents in a letter or newsletter about the current safety of the block and how we will maintain this over the duration of the works. It would be good to be able to put out a clear statement with the support of the fire brigade However, before we do so, I think we need to do a further belt and braces check on fire safety compliance in the block and stitch the fire brigade into this. Can you please lead on this and bring in members of A&R as necessary? Were you a regular reader of the Grenfell Action Group blog?
No, I was aware of it. Generally, when I first joined the TMO, Mr. O'Connor would send emails with his latest blog attached, but that stopped after about a few months. I think Mr. O'Connor left the country.
Right. Do you remember a policy decision being made by the TMO to block staff access to the blog?
I was aware of that, and but Councillor Blakeman would sometimes forward me an email saying this is Mr. Defarn's latest blog and ask for comment, and I would, so I did ask the head of IT to remove the block because I felt it was unhelpful, because if there was an issue being raised, and I did correspond with Mr. Defarn and explain that we weren't monitoring the blog, and I know Robert Black wrote to Mr. Defarn as well to explain that we didn't monitor and respond to blogs and round robin emails. I think it was quite a. The blog itself wasn't an engagement process. There was no way of contacting the person who was writing the blog, and in fact, the blog was anonymous. It's just we assumed it was Mr. Defarn, but there wasn't any means of contacting him, and Mr. Defarn was contacting the TMO on a regular basis if he had specific issues to raise.
Do you remember when access to the blog was blocked by the TMO?
No, I don't.
We can see here that your view was that Mr. Defarn's blog was scaremongering. Why did you think that?
It was raising issues of fire safety that I'd understood were in hand. So it was the blog itself that you showed me. Well, you haven't showed me the blog. You've made the reference in the email to Ben Dewis. Was about access across the green space around the block. And having recently read the blog, it was about changes in access arrangements within the building, which we had checked by the fire brigade, amongst others, to ensure that it was safe and appropriate. So my concern was, by raising a concern saying that it wasn't safe, could be quite a frightening message to residents, and I felt that we needed to get a clear message out to residents about what we were actively doing to make sure that the block was safe. But before we doing that, I suggested to Janice that we should do some further belt and braces checks just to make sure everything is in order.
Now, you say in your last answer you checked access arrangements with the fire brigade to ensure it was safe and appropriate. Are you saying that you investigated the fire safety concerns raised by Mr. Defarn in his email to Mr. Dewis?
I didn't deal with this as part of a complaint. This wasn't dealt with as part of a complaint. It was flagged up as I assume somebody has given me a heads up that there was this blog, and I've asked my team to check whether there's any issues being raised here that we need to be aware of, and look at how we get communication out to all residents in the block to reassure them of what action we've taken and what should happen.
Well, did you investigate any of the fire safety concerns raised by Ed Defarn in his email to Ben Dewis?
I don't. I wasn't party to that correspondence.
Well, you were, you see.
The Ben Dewis.
I've just shown you. Oh, you got roped into it, or looped into it.
Okay, so I'm. Right. I don't.
I'll ask my question again. Having seen these emails, as of the 4th or after the 4th of September 2014, did you or anybody under your direction investigate any of the fire safety concerns raised by Mr. Defarn?
Yes, so my correspondence here was for Janice to carry out further investigations. Her response to this, I understand, was will do. And there were... But there was a regular liaison between Janice and Claire and the fire brigade in relation to issues across the borough, but specifically with Grenfell. But there was also correspondence with, there was a regular engagement with the fire brigade, who would attend site on a regular basis to meet with Rydens to discuss issues that are emerging throughout the refurbishment works. So I knew there was a good liaison between the fire brigade and the team on site, and I was asking Janice and Claire to come to check that everything was in order before sending out a message to residents regarding how they should act in the event of a fire.
Just so that we're clear, when you say in the last but one paragraph, we need to do a further belt and braces check on fire safety compliance in the block and stitch the fire brigade into this, were you saying that Janice Ray should investigate Mr. Defan's concerns and ensure that his concerns were met?
Yes.
Did that happen?
Janet responded to me that she would do, and there was a dialogue going on from this, by which we did send out further fire safety information to residents in a future newsletter, I seem to remember.
There was. I'm just going to show you those. My question, did that happen? Was there, in fact, a further belt and braces check on fire safety compliance in the block with the fire brigade stitched into it?
I don't know whether the fire brigade was stitched into it, but actually the fire brigade were engaged with Janice and Claire on a bi-monthly basis, and also there were regular independent visits of the fire brigade to meet with Rydens on site to consider any issues that were arising over the evolution of the work.
Did you yourself follow up to make sure that the belt and braces check that you had asked for was carried out fully to your satisfaction?
I don't recall specifically how I did that, but there was a regular liaison between myself and the project team, Janice and the contractor.
Yes, there was. But my question, once more, do you remember actually following up and satisfying yourself that the belt and braces check that you had asked for was in fact carried out?
I didn't double check.
Right. Why is that?
I think that, well, I didn't specifically double check in terms of an action, but obviously I had an ongoing dialogue with those teams, and from that I would have got comfort that those issues have been reviewed.
We've identified 2 Grenfell Tower regeneration newsletters, you refer to newsletters, which refer to fire safety advice. The first one is July 2014, which predates this exchange and predates your request for a belt and braces check. The second one is dated May 2016, which is, I'll just show it to you, JRP 6028. There's the date. The fire safety advice is on page 4, which is about the stay put policy. It's not about fire brigade access. Do you know why a letter or newsletter, or indeed any information about the fire safety of the block was not sent to residents after the email exchange we've seen in July to September 2014?
I don't know whether any separate information was sent through Janice after that meeting.
Have you seen any?
I haven't seen any meeting,
Right.
But I don't know what other correspondence has gone on in relation to that.
Right. Now, I'm going to turn to a different topic, which I'm unlikely to finish before the break, but I'm going to start it, Mr. Chairman, if I can. And that's the 2015 complaint about the AOV system. I'm going to ask you to start, please, by looking at your first statement, page 15. And it's paragraph 82. You set out in that paragraph at some length your understanding of the AOV system for the refurbishment. And at the end of it, you say this in the last sentence: all I can say is that it was a system that was designed and checked by Max Fordham to be compliant with current regulations, that it was still under warranty with Ryden at the time of the fire. To what extent were you involved with the other contractors working on the smoke control system?
Sorry, which other contractors?
Well, for example, PSB.
No, not.
Have you heard of PSB?
No.
No? Right. Were you aware that it was PSB who designed the system as installed rather than Max Fordham? Did you not know that?
No.
Right. Were you kept updated about the progress of replacement of the AOV?
In broad terms, as part of the overall programme, yes.
Right. Let's go to TMO 1008416, please.
Just on the subject of the design of it, Max Fordham were actually retained by the TMO to give advice on the technical aspects of the installation of the AOV under the design and build contract with Rydans. So Max Fordham had a role in ensuring that the AOV complied.
Yes. Can we please go to this email, which is 5th of January 2015 from you to Amanda Johnson at RBKC. And I'll just explain. It relates to a complaint raised by the Grenfell Tower Leaseholders Association through Tunde Awaderu, who was still the vice chair at that time, regarding, among other things, the progress of the work on the smoke extraction system. So that's the topic. And if we look at the foot of the email thread at page 4, we can see, I'm so sorry, again, it starts at the bottom of page 3, from the Grenfell Tower Leaseholders Association to Councillor Dent Code and Judith Blakeman, Friday, 2nd of January 2015, with a long list of copy E's on it, including you, I think. And if you go to page 4, you can see that there's a subject line, improvement work on existing smoke extraction and ventilation system which links to the fire alarm under the Grenfell regeneration project. And if we pick it up on page 4, 4 paragraphs up from the bottom, so about halfway down, it says Ryden has been on site. Can you see that?
Yes.
Thank you. Ryden has been on site since June 2014, and so far there is no tangible evidence whatsoever Ryden and KCTMO intend to carry out replacement of the smoke vent and extraction and ventilation system which links to the fire alarm. We need confirmation that Ryden will carry out the work as part of the regeneration project as promised by the KCTMO. And then they copy in the next paragraph the fire risk assessment of the 20th of November 2012. Now, we know that you saw this because if you go up to page 1, you are at the top of the email string and say in the second paragraph, Mr. Awaderu's correspondence is addressed to Councillor Dentcode and Councillor Blakeman. And it's been forwarded to you for help in responding. I suggest we treat this as a members' inquiry at this stage. So that's the members' inquiry route as opposed to the complaints procedure route, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, you then go on to say, I intend to draft a brief response to Councillor Blakeman explaining the following, and then there's a long list of matters underneath that, going over onto page 2. Just in general, is it right that your email response here at the top of this thread was effectively discussing how the TMO should respond to this inquiry?
I think Mr. Awaderu's email was sent to a very wide audience, and I was trying to establish what was the appropriate route to respond.
Yeah. And would the TMO's response to this email have been any different if it had been treated as a complaint and sent through the complaints procedure as opposed to being treated as a members' inquiry?
I don't think so, no.
Right.
Save the fact that a complaint would be responding directly to Mr. Awaderu, whereas a members' inquiry should be responding directly to the councillor.
Yes, I see. Did you tell the GTLA that their complaint would be considered as a members' inquiry and treated through that route as opposed to the complaints procedure route?
I don't remember what was ultimately written.
Now let's go back up to page 1 and go down to page 2. We've scrolled down through page 1 where you're setting out some of the intended response. And on page 2, picking it up at the top of the screen, you say, the scope of work to Grenfell includes the upgrade / renewal of smoke and fire safety and ventilation system. The system is currently beyond economic repair. We are working with building control to agree a design for the system that will meet current standards. We've been in close contact with the fire brigade to make them aware of the current situation so that they can take this into account in their approach to any fire safety issues. Our contractors, Ryden, have also been in liaison with the fire brigade to agree safe working methods in the interim while the system is being worked on. We've posted notices throughout the building and explained in newsletters that a stay-put policy is in place in the event of a fire. Now, just going up to the second paragraph there, where you say the system is currently beyond economic repair, what did you mean by that?
I think it couldn't be relied on to work at any particular time. It could be, it needed replacement. Yes.
And was it working at all?
At this particular time, I don't recall, but there were certainly times when it was working, but at no point in the time that I was there was it reliably working. It needed to be replaced.
When you said it was beyond economic repair, did you mean to indicate that it was technically capable of repair, but the cost of doing so was prohibitive?
No, I meant it really wasn't working.
Really wasn't working.
It needed to be replaced, is what I was trying to communicate.
Right. When you said that, what was your information based on? What was your statement there based on?
I'd had various reports from the contracts management team within my team who've been trying to maintain it through the existing term contracts. I'd had feedback from the contractors who were working for Rydens in this, and also there'd been various communications that I'd understood between Janice Ray and Claire and the fire brigade in relation to this matter.
Do you know for how long these AOV system had been beyond economic repair?
I don't precisely know.
Did you investigate?
No. Well, my assumption at this time was that the system wasn't working, and the priority was to get the new system in place.
Did you, at this time or around this time, did you see the draft existing fire safety strategy which had been done by Exova in respect of Grenfell Tower in August 2012?
No.
Did you know of its existence?
No. That was before my time.
To your knowledge, had anyone at the TMO actually told the LFB precisely what the state of the AOV system was in the way that you've just described it to us?
The way I described it is the way I'd understood it, is that there had been clear communication with the LFB about this current condition. The fire brigade had visited site on a regular basis as part of familiarisation visits, but also as part of the liaison with Rydens over the duration of the works. So I'd be really surprised if it wasn't clear throughout all that communication that they weren't clear that there was a significant problem with that.
Right.
And I'd also had feedback through, I can't remember exactly who it was from now, who explained that they were aware of the situation and would take breathing apparatus if there were an issue. That was my understanding, is that they had a way of working around the issue.
What was the basis of your understanding that the LFB were fully aware of the precise condition of the AOV?
As I've just described, there's been extensive communication with the fire brigade and at various levels within various teams, and including the health and safety team and the project manager for the project, but also independently with Rydens and the LFB. So my understanding was that there had been clear communication on
Yes,
that.
I'm asking you for the source of your understanding. Was it a person or a letter? Did somebody
It's a
say
s-
to you, the LFB have been told it's not working?
It's stated in a number of minutes that I've seen that the LFB are aware. That was clearly my understanding at that time.
Right. And Mr. Chairman, it's a couple of minutes past 1. I apologise for going over a little bit, but we are still on this topic and this email chain, but this is probably the moment for the lunch break.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Millett. Well, there we are. Mr. Maddison will break now to have some lunch. We'll resume at 2 o'clock, please.
Thank you.
And no talking to anyone about your evidence when you're out of the room. Okay. Good. Thank you. 2 o'clock, please. Yep.